So recently, there's been some controversy surrounding Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis after Dricus beat Robert Whittaker, in which I totally predicted 100%. I said in my video that Dricus would win by second round TKO. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind in this matchup that Whittaker will be able to get this win.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the?
So props to me. But all jokes aside, in Dricus's post-fight interview, he pretty much got steamrolled by Adesanya when he came into the octagon and pretty much sat there and spewed out a bunch of racial slurs, really trying to get into the head of Dricus, which he did have a few good comebacks against Adesanya, but mainly the whole entire post-fight or interaction between them two was Adesanya just completely going after Dricus. And this has led to, a bunch of fans coming out and pretty much criticizing him, saying that his actions were unjustifiable and that he made a fool of himself. He made a mockery of himself as a middleweight champion, that he didn't act accordingly to the situation, which in my opinion, I couldn't agree more. I think that Adesanya went out there and did a little bit too much. I thought he was drunk at one point. His voice was very hoarse. And I think that maybe the alcohol got a little bit to him. I think he got a little bit too in his feels and his emotions. And I can understand why. And what really led up to this was Dricus's interview that he had, I believe, months ago or maybe even weeks ago at some point. I don't remember exactly when it happened, but basically what Dricus said was that he wanted to be the first champion that was born, raised, and lives and trains out of Africa, which apparently Israel Adesanya just spun his own narrative about that. And apparently the new narrative now is that Dricus said that he wanted to be the first real African champion, which he never said. He actually never said that. And now the whole media, everybody that is in UFC or MMA media is taking that narrative and applying it to Dricus and basically calling him a racist. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's not try to work our way around this. People are considering Dricus du Plessis a racist, and the media wants people to believe that Dricus du Plessis is trying to wage this race war against Adesanya, and that could be so much farther from the truth. It's not actually what's really going on in all of reality. What Dricus said, and I'll do my best to quote him accurately, was that he wanted to be the first African-born fighter that actually still trains in Africa, that still lives in Africa, to become champion.
Well, did those belts ever go to Africa? As far as I know, it came to America and New Zealand. I'm going to take a belt to Africa. I'm the African fighter in the UFC. Myself and Cameron, we breathe the African air. We wake up in Africa every day. We train in Africa. We're African born. We're African raised. We still reside in Africa. We train out of Africa. That's an African champion, and that's who I'll be.
And if you didn't know, Israel Adesanya moved from Nigeria to New Zealand, where he eventually trained and became champion. He didn't actually do it out of Nigeria. And that's the whole point that Dricus is trying to make when he said the things he said in his interview. And it led to Kamaru Usman coming out and basically just demolishing Dricus as an African. He said that he really wasn't even African, and that he should watch out for what he has to say.
And so just because you went over to South Africa and you're raised there, that doesn't make you African. So,
which to me is a whole miscommunication. It's a whole misunderstanding between what Dricus really said. I think Usman kind of took this and took it as a race thing, and he said that, oh, because your people came from Europe, I would assume that's where Dricus's heritage comes from, and came to South Africa, he's not really African. But I think the real point that Usman was trying to make was that you're not black, you're not really African. Your history doesn't tell you you came from Africa. It tells you came from probably somewhere in Europe. So you're not African, which I think is dumb. Dricus is born, raised, lived in Africa. He is truly an African fighter. There's no doubts, if or buts about it. If you were born in Africa, guess what? You're African. It's as simple as that. But this whole race thing is becoming a huge narrative about this whole situation. And I think it's dumb. I think this doesn't really involve, being black or white or being a particular race and not being a particular race. It makes you more African than somebody else, which is completely not true. I think Usman and Adesanya would agree with me on that point. I think that Dricus is for sure an African in everybody's eyes and even theirs. But since he's a white person saying this stuff, it's an issue. And I think Adesanya knows this. I really think he actually knows that this is not a big deal. It really isn't a big deal. But I think that his insecurities and that his ego has kind of put him in a position to where he wants to speak out, because Dricus is trying to do something that he can't do. No matter what Adesanya tries to do, he can never ever claim that he lived in Nigeria or lived in Africa and became champion. He can never claim that unless now he wants to move back there or some reason, but I doubt he'll ever do that and leave City Kickboxing for Nigeria, where he might not be as good because of the coaches and the training and the economic resources and the money involved. So he wouldn't ever go back to Nigeria to train when there's not much of a MMA base there. And this is a huge identity crisis for him. Let's be honest, like me being a biracial male, I'm half black, half white. I have an African-American mother and a Caucasian father. I know how it feels to have some sort of identity crisis where you can't really fit in with a particular group because of how you look or what you've done or where you've gone or where you live. I've had my own identity issues, and I can see it in Adesanya. I can see it by the way he acts, that he has a true identity crisis. And so when Dricus says that he wants to be the first fighter that actually trains and lives in Africa to get the belt, it hurts him deep inside of his core. It ruins his own ego and his own identity. He wants to be that guy that truly holds the African, or be the pinnacle of African fighting. And he can't be that if Dricus wins. And that kills his ego. It superly hurts his ego, if that's even a word. And it makes sense because I can understand when Adesanya left Nigeria at a very young age and really kind of grew up in New Zealand, he kind of left that piece behind him, and he can't really identify with that culture as much as he could in New Zealand because he grew up there, he lives there, he trains there. And going back to Nigeria might be a bit awkward for him because he might not know how they will receive him. We as humans are innately tribalistic, and so when you've gone away from some place for so long and you didn't really establish your roots there, you don't really identify with that group of people as close as you would with the other people you grew up with. So I can see how Adesanya is proud to be a Nigerian fighter, but when he goes there, he might have a little bit of internal dialogue or internal controversy within himself that he might not be, he might not fit in with the Nigerians as he would like to. And so Dricus calling this out kind of brings that into light, into fruition, and it might kill his ego. It might just totally hurt his ego. And I can kind of understand that because you kind of lose sight of that cultural or that group of people because you've been away for so long. Like when I grew up in a predominantly white area, so sometimes it might be hard for me to understand the social cues or fit in with African Americans because I just never was around them when I was younger. So for Adesanya, going back to Nigeria might make him feel a bit awkward or not know how to fit in with the Nigerian crowd, even though he's Nigerian, even though he is perfectly an African fighter. He just has that little bit of doubt in himself as a true Nigerian. I don't know if I can say that, but he might have a little bit of doubt of his social status and how he fits in with the culture, not living there and being there for the majority of his life. And this totally makes sense because he can't really identify with all of the Nigerian people. He was a rich Nigerian family. He had servants when he was younger. If you didn't know that, Adesanya actually had servants who bathed him when he was a little child. And he went to New Zealand and went to like a private school. Like, he was a very wealthy family. And you saw that in his little parade when he went back, when he first won the belt. He went back to the area where he grew up in, and it was a predominantly rich area. And I'm not gonna say it was super rich area, but in terms of Nigeria, it was probably a more wealthy area. And then when he went to the area that was the hood or the slums, he had issues. And he actually decided, and I don't know how you would even do this, but he did it anyways. But he went there with bodyguards to the slums of Nigeria, with bodyguards with AK-47s, and they kind of rejected him. So he got upset. His ego got hurt when he went to the slums of Nigeria to show off his big shiny belt and all of his wealth. They didn't care. They didn't give a fuck. and his ego got hurt by that. He said this in a Joe Rogan podcast.
I went there just trying to like show love to the hood, say what's up, and all this area boys like, oh God, what thing they do here? Like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm just looking around. He's like, you kind of, you must settle loss. Like, you got to settle them. You got to make sure they're all right. I was like, don't worry, we'll look after you guys. But then within the first 5 minutes, me and Abiola, my friend who came with me, he's like, we got to go. Because he's very smart. He's very aware as well. So we're like, all right. And I had a guy with an AK with me, a security guard. And the guys, the gangsters, they were kind of flexing. I was like, oh, fuck you guys then. So the next day, see, that's the asshole in me. I went there shirtless, all my chains on, fucking vest, and I got like more security with me, with more AKs, and we went deep. We didn't have to go deep to get that sky shot, and Jeff hates me for it because he fucking panicked the whole time.
So he decides to go back, get more bodyguards with more guns, and then come back to the slums and just flex on them. Just absolutely flex on them, which in my opinion is extremely fucked up and awful thing to do. When it was all fun and games and all handy dandy when you're in your own little area you grew up in, everybody was cheering you on, you can interact with all the little kids and teach them how to throw a pop or punch. But when you got to the slums, the place where you don't really identify with that well, and they reject you, your ego gets hurt and makes you not feel as Nigerian as you want to be. And that's what happened. He went back and got more bodyguards to flex on these people. What the fuck are you doing, Adesanya? That's awful. And so now I can see why his ego would get so hurt and his insecurities would be so out in the open now, because Dricus put that to light. He put it absolutely to light. And now that his ego is hurt, he can't contain himself. He can't control the anger and his identity crisis within himself. And he's taking it out on Dricus. And that's why he wants this fight so bad. Not because Dricus wants to be, or that Dricus is racist, but because Dricus is a direct threat to who he is as a person, not as a fighter, not as a champ or taking his belt, but a threat to him and his identity. And that's exactly why Dricus is his most dangerous matchup. I'm gonna say it. Dricus is his most dangerous matchup. I think Adesanya might get a bit too emotional. If you thought Pereira was an emotional matchup for Adesanya, Dricus is going to be 10 times the more emotion than Pereira was. It's gonna be, we're gonna see an Adesanya just go off on crazy on racial slurs, and I think he's trying to contain it. He put out a tweet basically detailing that he might calm down a little bit. I don't know if he will or not, because I know that his personality, with watching Adesanya throughout the years and originally being a fan, now I don't like him as much anymore. I can just really see that him just, not being able to contain himself. And it leads me to, trying to figure out how Adesanya can fix this. How can he really figure out how to, calm himself down and turn this around to get people back on his side? And one thing that he really needs to do is just own up to it, man. Just own up to it. Don't claim him as a racist. Don't try to, insinuate or try to lead on people think that Dricus is racist, like how the media is doing. Just be honest. Just say that, hey, he's threatening my identity, and it might be some pussy shit at the end of the day, and you might be like, oh, bro, like, Adesanya, you're being weird. But him being authentic and true to himself is what the fans want, and what he kind of needs to come to terms to this situation. And if he can't do that, it's only going to be a longer downhill road for him and his own identity. So hopefully he can come out, and maybe sometime during an interview, or maybe when he gets to the fight actually in September, maybe he can talk to Dricus or the media about his feelings about him being a Nigerian. It's so obvious. Like, he can't hide this anymore. He's just trying to make this fake narrative about Dricus being a racist, which is so damn stupid. It's whatever. But at the end of the day, man, I'm rooting for Dricus to beat Adesanya. I think he needs to put him out cold, man. I think he needs a reality check, bro. Like, no matter what, even if Dricus wins, loses, or even draws Adesanya, it won't change the fact that he did not train or he does not live in Nigeria anymore. That part is gone. That is history. And no matter what you do to Dricus, no matter how badly you beat him or smoke him in the first round or make him your bitch and throughout the entire fight, it will not change the fact that, guess what? You didn't live, or you didn't train and get your belt from Nigeria. You did it from New Zealand, and it's just that simple. So hopefully in the future, I want to see Dricus win. I'm rooting for him. After his last fight against Whitaker, I'm now officially a fan of him. I want to see him succeed. I want to see him get that belt. I think Adesanya needs a reality check in his life. So Good luck to Drickus, but that's all I have for you guys today. I appreciate you guys watching this far into the video. If you have made it this far, it makes me really happy. But make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon as well. Drickus for the win, man. I might actually pick him too, but we'll see when we get there. Peace.